This isn't a segment, it's a marathon. Fox News devoted the better part of an entire Tuesday evening, from special report through the five through multiple panel discussions and market analysis, to the Iran war's newest phase, the blockade, the collapsed talks, the possible resumption, the mines that may not exist, the Chinese tanker that sailed through, the Israel-Lebanon talks at the State Department, the 20-year enrichment proposal the president doesn't like, the $435 million a day Iran is losing, the S&P 500 nearly back to its pre-war high. Across all of it, buried in Hour 4, a single exchange may matter more than everything else combined. Harold Ford Jr., the Democratic contributor on The Five, said this: "We are probably going to end up with an agreement that's going to look a lot closer to what Obama negotiated several years ago than not." Nobody at the table agreed with him, but nobody could refute him either, and the numbers are already proving him right. Peter Doocy broke the evening's lead news. The U.S. negotiating team in Islamabad offered Iran a 20-year suspension of all uranium enrichment. Trump found out and didn't like it. "I've been saying they can't have nuclear weapons, so I don't like the 20 years, Trump told the New York Post. This is extraordinary. The President of the United States publicly rejected a key element of his own delegation's offer, after that offer was already on the table in Islamabad.
Also tonight, the State Department hosts talks between Israel and Lebanon over the bombing of Hezbollah terrorists. Senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy starts us off tonight live from the North Lawn. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Brett. Turns out the U.S. president not a fan of a key part of the U.S. delegation's offer to the Iranians, the part where the negotiators told Iran, you just can't enrich uranium for 2 decades. President Trump told the New York Post this afternoon, "I've been saying they can't have nuclear weapons, so I don't like the 20 years. But despite that, he still thinks that a deal with Iran is possible by the end of this week.
We do think we're dealing with some rational actors.
The U.S. and Iran may have stopped shooting at each other for now, but Israel and Hezbollah and Lebanon have not. So Secretary of State Marco Rubio played host today at the State Department.
All of the complexities of this matter are not going to be resolved in the next 6 hours, but we can begin to move forward.
President Trump told a New York Post reporter on assignment in Pakistan, the site of stalled U.S.-Iran peace talks, "You should stay there, really, because something could be happening over the next 2 days, and we're more inclined to go there." Democrats, unconvinced.
Not Operation Epic Fury, Operation Epic Failure.
Just a day after warning China not to provide Iran with air defense systems, the Chinese are saying they're actually working to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
All parties need to remain calm and exercise restraint. China will continue playing a constructive role.
While the strait is closed, some American businesses will suffer.
Certain industries are going to be hit harder, right? Airlines, farmers, what that's going to mean for food. Military contractors are going to do better.
A domino effect from a squeezed Strait of Hormuz runs right through Europe. And a frustrated president posted today, Europe is desperate for energy, and yet the United Kingdom refuses to open North Sea oil, one of the greatest oil fields in the world. Tragic. No matter what Europe does, gas prices in the U.S. may not peak for weeks.
This is the road to more secure and lower long-term energy supplies, but it does mean higher prices today, probably means higher prices for a few more weeks.
High gas prices tell summer a tough sell. So tomorrow, tax day, we are told that some top officials are going to come out and make the case that certain Trump policies like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime are saving some people more money, no matter how much gas costs. Brett?
Peter Doocy live at the North Lawn. Peter, thanks.
So a third U.S. aircraft carrier now sailing towards the Middle East. The USS George H.W. Bush taking the longer route, more cautious route, sailing along the coast of Africa, intentionally avoiding the Red Sea, where Iranian-backed terror groups could pose a threat to ships going through that area. Retired four-star General Jack Keane is here with us. First to national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Martha. Iran's interior minister ordered the governors of border provinces to neutralize the threat of a naval blockade. President Trump warned Iran's fast attack ships They would be blown up if they approach any U.S. ships involved in the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. So there appears to be a standoff. The U.S. Navy has 18 warships right now in the Middle East, including the USS Tripoli, which has Marines on board who can carry out search and seizure operations at sea of ships that left Iranian ports and try to leave the strait. The USS Michael Murphy and USS Frank E. Peterson, two guided missile destroyers, entered the strait this weekend to begin setting conditions for clearing mines. We learned yesterday that the USS George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier strike group, which left Norfolk, Virginia on March 31st, had to go around the southern tip of Africa, following threats from the Houthis to strike ships in the Red Sea and close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in solidarity with Iran. Remember, from March to May last year, the Pentagon carried out Operation Rough Rider, a 6-week operation to degrade the Houthis' ability to threaten ships in the Red Sea. It cost over $1 billion and led to concerns about depleting U.S. munition stockpiles. $200 million were spent on missiles in the first 3 weeks of that operation. The U.S. lost 7 MQ-9 Reaper drones worth $30 million apiece and 2 FA-18 jets worth $50 million each. CENTCOM hit more than 1,000 targets using these weapons, and yet the Houthis survived and are now threatening to disrupt global shipping by closing the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, very similar to what they're doing in the Strait of Hormuz, Martha.
Okay, we'll see where it goes. Jennifer, thank you very much. Jennifer Griffin. Joining me now, retired 4-star General Jack Keane, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, and Fox News senior strategic analyst. General Keane, always good to have you with us. You hear this discussion and the potential for Iranian fast boats that could attack some of these ships coming through, or that the Houthis might resurge in order to try to close off the other opening that the Saudis use primarily for their oil transit on the Red Sea. Where do you think this is headed today, General?
Well, I think we've turned the momentum clearly around here. What happened is certainly the Iranians shut down the Straits of Hormuz, and they got a ceasefire out of that. The war was stopped. That's kind of what they wanted. They offered negotiations, but what they really wanted was the war to stop because we were pounding the daylights out of them. And the president and his national security team, and certainly the CENTCOM commander, assessed that situation. This is the strength of the American military. We're very adaptable, we're flexible, we see what the enemy does, and we certainly switch plans and react accordingly. So you're seeing that reaction here. And clearly what we have achieved here is we're shutting down Iran's source of income, period. That is what has taken place before our eyes. That's economic warfare. And what has it given? It's given the administration considerably more leverage going into these negotiations than what they had the first time. That's the reality of what took place. I think the Iranians have made 2 miscalculations here. Yes, they shut the Straits of Hormuz down, and we began to pay an economic and political price for that inside the United States. And yes, there was certainly pressure on the administration and on President Trump as a result of that. They went into those negotiations thinking this is going to be good for us because the administration is going to make some concessions to us because of that pressure. Wrong. That did not happen. As a matter of fact, we stood our ground. The president is talking to his team. He said, I want everything. And they didn't get everything. And Iran had to go home with their tail between their legs and figure out what's the strategy next here. The other thing is they're threatening, as usual, strong rhetoric, how they're going to interfere with what we're doing here in terms of this blockade, which has taken all of their revenue away. Well, if they're going to do that over the next 8 days, you know what's going to happen. We're back in full combat operations again. They know that. We'll see if they're actually going to take that move. In terms of where we're going here, remember, this is phase 1. The blockade, take their revenue away from them and make certain that there is no ships going in, going out, dealing with Iranian oil. But how much of the other ships that are not involved in Iranian oil, all the rest of those countries there that are distributing oil, are they going to flow through the straits? Or are they still going to be, in their minds, are the owners of the ships still feel it's too dangerous to do that because of the Iranian threat that had existed, and in their minds does it still exist? The United States military and the president are prepared for that reality. And if that doesn't open up, and certainly we'll see if it does, my judgment is it probably won't. And that brings in then the operation to open up the straits. And what the military mission is, first clear it, get the mines out of there, make it secure, and then prepare to escort ships through it and protect them all through that escort, with drones out around them and drones hundreds of miles away, picking up any missiles that are coming. Same thing with aircraft. Protect that entire transit through there. And that's a longer operation, and at some point, if we have to continue that operation, then we would turn it likely over to allies and partners. So there's really two phases to this. The phase one, the blockade phase, and then two, do we need the other phase? And assuming that we may need the other phase, preparations are being made certainly to do that phase and do it earnestly and successfully.
Who would those allies and partners be in that phase two?
Yeah, they would be. And
Who
there
are they?
A number of them that have volunteered to do that. There's a number of European countries that are going to participate. Certainly allied countries, the Arab countries in the region are going to participate in that as well. And I think there may be some Asian countries, but I'm not sure yet. There's been some discussions with them in terms of participation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so listen, we need help to do that. No doubt about it. And we've said that from the beginning. We can start it and make sure it's secure. And that's one of the things the other countries don't want to be involved in getting that level of security established. But we frankly do need some assistance to carry that on over time. And hopefully that the promise that we're getting, hopefully it's fulfilled.
Yeah, well, as the president says, Asia and Europe have a lot more transit through this area than we do. So hopefully they'll change their minds. Starmer doesn't seem to be on the same page at the moment, but we'll see where this goes. Thank you so much, General. As always, day by day, you are the best source for following what's going on. Thank you, sir.
Is President Trump's squeeze on Iran starting to pay off? The blockade of the Strait of Hormuz hitting day 2, and 47 telling the Post the second round of talks with Iran could be happening over the next 2 days. J.D. Vance telling Bret Baier, our very own, how Iranian negotiators didn't have the authority to agree to Trump's terms and needed to go back to Tehran to get approval. Watch.
Really, the ball is very much in their court. The only thing the Iranians have been able to do, they haven't, of course, beaten us militarily. They've had their military been decimated. They haven't been able to prosecute the case when it comes to weapons of war. What they have done is engage in this act of economic terrorism against the entire world. The President of the United States showed two can play at that game.
And how's this for a petty twist? Democrats and the liberal media sound like they'd rather see Iran come out ahead just so Trump doesn't score a win.
I really don't want to see Bibi Netanyahu or Donald Trump politically strengthened by this war because they are two awful human beings. And so I really find myself torn.
The now deceased Supreme Leader, who I'm not mourning his death, right, a very bad person, he did have a fatwa in place that said no development of nuclear weapons. The problem is his now second eldest son, Ali Khamenei, doesn't believe in that fatwa.
Donald Trump also told the demented lie in attacking the Pope that Iran wants to, quote, exterminate the world.
Well, Dana, I got to give them credit for honesty. I mean, they really can't decide who they want to win, Iran or America.
It's like hard to say this, but I guess we're going to have to go with Iran.
Yeah, oh well.
This one. Well, you know, now we know. We don't have to guess, and I guess that's fine. I thought that when the vice president revealed that the Iranians couldn't make a deal because they have to go back to Tehran, that's pretty interesting because it means that they probably don't have a way to communicate in a way that doesn't reveal the location because the Ayatollah, you know that guy you keep talking about, maybe he was like, I'll just sit here and we have to do everything by pen and paper at this point. I feel like, you know, in reality shows, which I don't watch a ton of, but in reality shows where they just keep you hanging on, like, and if you stay around to after the next commercial break, then you might find out who did it. That's what I feel like. In the next 2 days, there might be talks. I don't know. We just started the blockade. We'll see what happens. There's a lot of maneuvering going on. China is involved, et cetera. There's, again, as Greg Gutfeld would say, Dana, you're so intelligent because you're saying you don't know what's going to happen.
I know it's going to happen. Trump's going to get angry when it takes 3 days for the gay Ayatollah to say, this is no good or this is good. That's going to be so frustrating.
I think gayness is the least of his worries right now. I think breathing might be higher up on his list, and I'm not quite sure he's doing that.
Yeah.
I think what we're witnessing is weekend at Khomeini's, and it's not going well for either side. You know, it would be like if Kamala Harris were negotiating, because right now we have two sets of people we're negotiating with. The people in the room who don't have any power, and the people who are terrified in Tehran who hate the United States so much, they would rather pull Iran down with the rest of the world. And if Kamala Harris were negotiating, we'd have like sober Kamala Harris, where she would be able to explain everything, and then the rosé all day one who would be laughing and talking about falling out of a coconut tree. I do think that J.D. Vance has comported himself well. I hope that the talks go well. I don't have any faith in Iran. I think that they are stubborn. I think that they are murderous. They are incredibly desperate, yet somehow they're not out of missiles. And that makes them more of a force than I think anyone had anticipated. I think the president and the Secretary of War thought that this would go as smoothly as the first Iranian incursion and the Venezuela bout did. And we're not seeing that. And to Dana's point, we don't know the terminus. I hope the next round of talks give us more confidence and bring us to a close.
I mean, you do see the light at the end of the tunnel. They have not attacked any of these destroyers in the Strait.
Yep.
Talks do seem to be moving in the right direction, and China does feel pressure. So you can kind of see this thing, how it winds down.
This does dovetail with the Dana theory that this is a sweeps week gambit aimed at the spring ratings book. I think it's good. I think it's very TV of us, and I agree. And since we're talking about TV, can we just acknowledge really quickly, Lawrence O'Donnell talks at all times like he's trying to hold in a fart. I know that's not very adult of me on a serious show of this stature.
So serious.
But when he says Iran and President Trump, I'm like, dude, just let it go. You don't know everybody in this elevator. They'll be off at the next floor. But the Thomas Friedman thing, you have to admire the candor on some level. Okay, because he's flat out saying we're in a nuclear standoff for all intents and purposes. We don't want them to have a nuke. He concedes that's a problem, but says my own political preferences are more important than the existential threat we're dealing with. That's a level of self-absorption that I got to be honest with you. The people in Iran rooting for a settlement right now are not sitting in their caves in fear with their soul in a fetal position going, I just hope it doesn't happen under this Khomeini because he's a dirtbag. If we can get to the midterms, it's embarrassing, man.
Yeah, the market liked day 2 of the blockade, Harold, and it looks like the S&P's recovered all the losses since the beginning of the war.
So a couple of things. The market did. It recovered and continues to because it's believing there's going to be a second meeting and believes that we may find some resolution here. There are two goals we're trying to get. And I never liked differing with DP on anything, but I didn't think Vance was particularly effective yesterday. He said that they were inches away from an agreement, but he didn't believe the people in the room were able to settle on an agreement, and they met for 21 hours. This is a 6,000-year-old civilization that feels like their country and what they represent is facing and has an existential threat posed to them. They were not going to solve this in 21 hours. I thought there was progress made there, but I wouldn't have criticized the people there in the room like he did, but maybe that's part of the strategy they have. We have two goals here. First, open up the Strait. That's why the market is responding as it is. And two, the most important is to ensure that they cannot make a nuclear weapon and they can't threaten us or our allies in the region. Now, I said yesterday, the blockade has been a success. It's a success because we are depriving the Iranians of money. Now, it was reported today that a Chinese vessel got through, then it had to come back through. I'm curious as we get some more reporting this evening from some of our reporters and other outlets to figure out what exactly happened there. I do hope that we, the United States, are not cherry picking or deciding who can get through, who cannot get through. It sets an awful precedent for commercial.
It didn't leave an Iranian port. That's why.
Right. So I think it sets. You're probably right, and I trust you. But my point is, this is a bad precedent to set in a commercially important piece of geography. And I hope if the White House and the Department of War are of this position, they need to share with the world and us what the real goal is here. But the blockade, in my estimation, the reason it's so important is that it's depriving them of money. And I'm hopeful that this will force them back to the table.
Up to $434 million a day.
Exactly. $500 million a day they're losing. So finally, The losing the money is great. I don't think all Democrats are rooting for the Iranians. I'm a Democrat. I have a lot of friends who are Democrats. We want the United States to win. I think that what Tom Friedman, I didn't quite understand it fully, but I think he dislikes Trump so much. He doesn't want this to be a victory for Trump. But I want America to win, and that means the president, who's our commander-in-chief, will win as well. Finally, we are probably going to end up, Jesse, and everybody around the table, with an agreement between us and the Iranians that's going to look a lot closer to what Obama negotiated several years ago than not. I don't think the Obama deal was as bad as some people think. I won't go as far as my friend from the great senator from Virginia, Tim Keane, who said it would be the worst. It's the worst thing ever. But I do think if we'll look back and wonder why we withdrew ourselves from that agreement, if indeed we have to agree to something very similar a few years later.
We'll see. I'm not so sure you're right. You're probably wrong.
I hope I'm
we'll
not.
see.
I hope I'm not.
Yeah,
But if I am right,
too.
I hope you say I'm right.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're right, they're getting a lot. If you're right, they're getting a lot of cash in the mail, so that's good news for them.
Right, but well, it means that, and perhaps a few other things. We want 20 years. They want less than 10. Is how long they will not enrich uranium.
Well, neither of those things is never, which is what the obligation was.
Right.
But think about it, we're never.
I agree. I'm agreeing with you.
They're never going to not do it. They want a nuclear weapon. We've got to bring them into the Western world where they don't want to harm us and our friends. I don't mean to keep going.
It's okay, Harold. We love you.
We bring in Christian Whiten, former.
Vance, Witkoff, and Kushner proposed a 20-year freeze. Trump wants never. Iran wants less than 10 years. And the president is undercutting his own negotiators in a newspaper interview. Iran rejected the 20-year proposal. Discussions are being held about starting a second round of talks as early as Thursday. Here's the Ford observation made real. The JCPOA, Obama's 2015 deal that Trump withdrew from, imposed a 15-year restriction on enrichment. Trump's team just proposed 20 years. Iran reportedly wants less than 10. The eventual deal, if there is one, will land somewhere between 10 and 20. That is structurally the same deal Obama made, plus or minus a few years. Arrived at after 47 days of bombing, thousands dead, a closed strait, fractured alliances, and 4 pluses gas. Ford was right to raise it. Nobody wanted to hear it. But the math is the math. Here's the Ford observation made real. The JCPOA, Obama's 2015 deal that Trump withdrew from, imposed a 15-year restriction on enrichment. Trump's team just proposed 20 years. Iran reportedly wants less than 10. The eventual deal, if there is one, will land somewhere between 10 and 20.
So will they come
that
around
is
on this?
structurally the same deal Obama made, plus or minus a few years. Arrived at after 47 days of bombing, thousands dead, a closed strait, fractured alliances, and 4 plugs gas. Ford was right to raise it. Nobody wanted to hear it, but the math is the math. Keane, as always, provided the clearest strategic analysis. He outlined 2 phases. Phase 1, current, the blockade, cut Iran's revenue, force economic capitulation. We're shutting down Iran's source of income, period. That is economic warfare. Phase 2, if needed. Full military reopening of the strait. Clear mines, establish safe passage, escort commercial ships through with drones and aircraft, then hand escort duty to allied navies over time. His assessment of the Islamabad talks. Iran miscalculated twice. First, they thought shutting the strait gave them leverage to extract concessions. Wrong. The U.S. didn't concede. Second, they're now threatening to interfere with the blockade. If they're going to do that over the next 8 days, we're back in full combat operations. They know that. But Keane also acknowledged the blockade's limitation. Even with Iran's ports sealed, the rest of the Gulf's oil-producing nations need their ships to transit the strait. Are the owners of the ships still going to feel it's too dangerous? My judgment is it probably won't. Open up voluntarily. That's why Phase 2 may be necessary. Several European countries, Arab partners, and possibly Asian nations have volunteered for the escort phase, Keane said, but only after the U.S. establishes security first. The evening's most technically valuable segment came from a former Navy EOD specialist who provided details nobody else has. Intelligence says there might be maybe a dozen or so mines. There could be more. There could be none. Not one has been found yet to this day. Not one mine found. After weeks of claiming the strait was mined, after insurance companies raised premiums to prohibitive levels, after 180-plus tankers sat idle, not a single mine has been physically located. He explained the process. Unmanned underwater vehicles search for physical shapes. When found, a remotely operated vehicle or a Navy diver places a charge and destroys it. 2 dedicated minesweepers are transiting from Japan but haven't arrived yet. His most reassuring detail: the 2 conditions for successful mine clearing have both been met. Iran's mine-laying capability has been destroyed. We took out all of their serious mine layers. And the ceasefire provides a semi-permissive environment. His assessment of Iran's current military capability: they're making some really good Lego videos and AI videos trying to make fun of us and some rap dance music. That's about the extent of what they've got right now. While Fox ran its evening programming, CNN published satellite imagery that should have been the lead story everywhere. Iran has been working to remove debris blocking the entrances to its underground missile bases during the ceasefire. Front-end loaders can be seen scooping up rubble from blocked tunnels and loading it into dump trucks. U.S. intelligence assessed that roughly half of Iran's missile launchers were still intact after a month of fighting. Many of those launchers may have been buried underground by strikes on tunnel entrances. A researcher at the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies said, "A ceasefire requires you to accept that your adversary is going to reconstitute some of their military capacity that you just spent a bunch of time and effort and money destroying." He added that this was part of Iran's design. You eat the first attack, dig yourself out, and then launch again. Iran is digging its missiles out. During the ceasefire, while the U.S. celebrates the blockade, half the launchers survived. The bases were designed for exactly this scenario. Not one Fox segment mentioned this. The economic segments were genuinely informative. 2 market analysts, one Obama era, one pro-Trump, agreed on the fundamentals. Oil fell nearly 8% on Tuesday to $91.28 as the White House signaled potential second-round talks. Brent settled at $94.79. The S&P 500 has nearly recovered all losses since the war began. Oil futures for December are pricing at $75. The market believes this war ends. Mark Tepper, the wealth advisor, provided the most striking number. Iran's annual GDP is $400 billion. Within 90 days, we will have wiped out their entire year of GDP. Robert Wolf, the Obama advisor, offered the counterpoint. If we're staying north of $4 a gallon, that's going to be a real hit over the summer. The IEA expects oil demand to contract by 1.5 million barrels per day in the second quarter, the biggest drop since the COVID-19 pandemic. The IMF cut its growth outlook and said the global economy would teeter on the brink of recession if oil stays above $100 into 2027. The war's impact on energy prices is having a secondary suppressive effect on U.S. home sales. Mortgage interest rates have climbed. The markets believe this ends soon. They may be right. But if they're wrong, if Iran digs out its missiles, if talks collapse again, if the ceasefire expires next week without a deal, the economic consequences shift from manageable headwind to global recession. The broadcast's most inflammatory segment played clips of Tom Friedman saying he doesn't want Trump politically strengthened by the war, even though he wants Iran defeated. The 5-panel treated this as evidence that Democrats are rooting for Iran. Harold Ford pushed back. "I don't think all Democrats are rooting for the Iranians. I'm a Democrat. I have a lot of friends who are Democrats. We want the United States to win." Mark Penn, the Clinton advisor, made the most substantive Democratic argument for supporting the blockade. Having the Democrats go out like that every day really gives Iran comfort that maybe they don't have to make a deal. This is a legitimate point. When Senator Warner says, "I don't understand how blockading the strait pushes Iran to open it," that confusion, genuine or performative, signals to Tehran that American political will is fractured. Whether Democrats should subordinate their policy objections to a unified front is a fair debate. But the strategic reality Penn identified is real. Divided domestic politics weakens negotiating leverage. The fighting has killed at least 3,000 people in Iran, more than 2,000 in Lebanon, 23 in Israel, and more than a dozen in Gulf Arab states. 13 U.S. service members have been killed, 5,000 dead. Across 12 hours of Fox News primetime coverage, that number appeared 0 times. The human cost of this war, the Iranian families, the Lebanese civilians, the American service members, the Gulf state workers, was not part of any segment, any panel, any analysis. The FAO food crisis warning, not mentioned. The IRC humanitarian corridor request, not mentioned. The IEA's finding that this is the largest fuel disruption in history, mentioned in passing by a reporter, never discussed by a panel. Iran digging out its missile launchers during the ceasefire, not mentioned. French President Macron and British PM Starmer will co-chair a conference Friday for nations willing to deploy warships to escort tankers through the strait. This was mentioned only to mock Starmer, not to analyze whether a European escort mission might actually solve the problem the U.S. is trying to solve.
It's still the same old regime. They're an outlier.
Christian Whiten,
in that
the
region,
former State Department advisor, said something near the end of his segment that deserves to be the epitaph for this phase of the war. The countries that matter are Israel, the Gulfies, not NATO. 50 years since World War II, I think you are seeing a shift. It's a significant shift in the power center and global politics and where the alliances really are. He may be right. The old Western alliance, NATO, the transatlantic relationship, the rules-based international order is being replaced by a new alignment. The U.S., Israel, and the Gulf monarchies on one side, China, Iran, and Russia on the other, Europe somewhere in between holding conferences about conferences. Whether that's progress or catastrophe depends on which side of history you're standing on. And right now, nobody can tell which side that is. Day 47. The blockade holds. The talks may resume. The mines haven't been found. The missiles are being dug out. The markets are betting on peace. And a Democratic pundit on the 5 just told America that the deal they'll eventually get looks a lot like the one they tore up. The only question left is how many more people die before everyone admits it.